Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
Oh my gosh, you have found another episode of the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thank you so much for coming along on the journey of this show that we designed to be a resource for those who work in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society is a forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, visit digitalenterprisesociety.org. My name is Thom Singer, and I have the honor to co-host this show every single week with Craig Brown. Craig is an industry veteran and former PLM leader at General Motors. Hey, Craig.
Hey, Thom, it's great to hear your voice. Guess what? The snow's gone. Yes, folks, we've had snow where I live, and now it's finally melted, but that's okay. It'll be back in another week.
I was just going to say, by the time this show airs, Michigan's going to be covered in snow for the next 4 months.
Yeah, well, we were for the last 2 weeks. It's kind of annoying, actually. It's a little early.
Well, Craig, I look forward to every week when we do these interviews. I don't know about you, but I think they're a lot of fun. What do you think?
I think they're a lot of fun, and we look for, a variety of folks that have different perspectives. And we've been talking to a lot of end users. Mark and I have been doing our battles on different points of technology. And today's guest is back to one of the solution providers. And so we'll talk a bit about that and also about one of our committees, which we've interviewed people from the committee in the past. It's the AWG. We'll talk about what that is here in a second.
Awesome. Well, every single week, Craig and I try to bring to you, the listeners of this podcast, we try to bring interesting interviews and other ideas that are going to help everybody enhance and grow their careers. And today we are joined by Dave Chan. Now, Dave is a technical account manager with Siemens DISW. And what he does is he's a technical sales specialist who supports aerospace and defense, federal and marine, with digitalization solutions, which means all things PLM. Hey, Dave, welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast.
Thanks, Thom. I'm excited to be here. And hi, Craig. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to hear you.
Hey,
you too.
Hey, we're glad to have you here. Do us a favor. Give us a little bit of your backstory. How did you get involved with this crazy world of PLM?
Oh, that's crazy. So this is coming up on my 25th year at Siemens now, right? So just before I joined what it was called EDS Unigraphics, I was a customer. I was working as a methods engineer using Unigraphics V9. And so over time, I got to learn the tools and decided, hey, this is what I want to do. And so I got a position doing pre-sales work, demonstrating the technology for Unigraphics V10 at that time, right? So that was probably 96. And then over time, you go doing a lot of presentations and demonstrations, and then growing into the portfolio as far as the Team Center portfolio, and then some of our collaboration solutions, visualization solutions. Then I started moving into some business development consulting, and then doing some services delivery, and then was working with a lot of federal customers, and then decided to then move into some of the aerospace and defense business. And that's when I started learning more about this AWG, or at that time, I guess it was the Aerospace Interest Group, and then started to ask, hey, can I sit in the back? And I want to learn more about this, just because my customers, they're all here in the room, and I just want to understand the conversations. And then over time, the previous lead, or the liaison, which is what I'm now as this position for Siemens, decided to move on with another position outside of Siemens, and they asked me to take on the helm of being the liaison. And so I've been doing this now for since 2018, participating and now working with the AWG leadership, and it's great. I love the camaraderie, love the work, the networking with everybody here. It's wonderful.
So Dave, welcome to the podcast. So, I'm retired mostly, so I forget things, and I forget the last time you and I met, but we had to have met at a ASIG meeting, which became the AWG when we brought it into the Digital Enterprise Society. And describe in your words what's great about that group of folks. I mean, it's one thing to know about a particular industry, but describe the membership. I mean, and not in terms of individual companies, but it's different industries, right? Coming from different points of view.
Absolutely. So, like I mentioned, there's a lot of right now in the AWG. It's about 21 different companies. Some of them, some years it's a different number just based on the acquisition. So some companies now are one company, right? So that's a big difference in culture. But I would say overall, what the AWG is it's a great way to network with each other. There's a lot of camaraderie based on the history of this this group, right? If you remember, Craig, I mean, this group. This is before my time. Actually, it was formed in 1993. It's one of the water cooler breaks during PLM World. And so companies said, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? Right. And so say, hey, we need to start talking more often with each other and say, hey, maybe we can start a little group of, a series of calls or something like that. And over time, other companies wanted to be part of that, and then it started to formulate and have this own life of its own. So for me, I'm just participating and facilitating some of the discussions. But this AWG, I mean, it's self-run. I just just participate and hold on for the ride. It's great.
Well, I think this is one of the principles of the Digital Enterprise Society is groups of end users getting together to share experiences. You and I have a similar background. I became the methods leader at GM for powertrain. And when I got that group, it's largely new to me. I came from the control system side of the house. And so I asked one of the lead guys who was about my age, I said, so what industry groups should we be involved in? Now we're in the car companies, right? So I'm expecting a car industry group, right? And my friend Jim Stuckey, he drags me off to this ASIG meeting. And I'm like, well, these guys aren't car companies. They're other kinds of companies, and big companies and small companies. Anyways, the point was we were able to talk about, at the time we had some kind of deployment problem with some earlier version of Team Center. It must have been about 6 or 7, or, in 2005 was the timeline. And so from that time to 2015, I would go to this group of people and ask questions about, well, how did you roll this out? Or where's the knowledge-based engineering applications? Who's what's the strategic elements of it? And, how do you do it in your company? And it was interesting comparing car companies with space companies, with commercial airplane companies, with guys like shipbuilders, the rest of the story in the federal side. So we learned a lot from each other. We pushed out some new versions of NX together, and you would have thought those would have been industry specific, but in fact, it was what is now the AWG that helped make that happen. So very interesting, and I thank you a lot for keeping the flame going and keeping Siemens involved. I'm glad to hear the next generation has kept it going as well, and so that's great. Now, from your vantage point, so you're coming from Siemens, so you've heard all these voices. When they conflict, how do you deal with that? I mean, they will have interests that aren't aligned, right? Partly because of the industry and partly the different sizes of companies. Is there something you do especially unique about getting them to see the light the same way, so that you can then say to your company, well, let's develop it this way and it'll benefit the most people?
Well, that's a great question, because so what we do is as a liaison, I also have the weights or the corporate backing behind me. So I have the product managers, the business units, whether it's from the Team Center, NX, or simulation or manufacturing. And we have leadership that has dedicated resources to these efforts, like to support these kind of conversations within the aerospace working group. So then we can start having some of these finer discussions, right? And so maybe it's a project. Maybe it's a subgroup that we're working closer together with this little subset of this larger AWG team, and then start to refine and understand more of the requirements that those individuals or those companies need. And it will be beneficial for the rest of the industry, whether it's aerospace or automotive. But now we're getting those requirements now collected right with the product managers, and so it's more of a collective voice now that's now wanting these features or these capabilities. So instead of one company say, "Hey, I want this functionality," and they file a enhancement request, right? And so it's better than to have 10 enhancement requests based on this one functionality, or maybe you want one enhancement request that has 10 companies that are signing on to that, right? And so that's how we're evolving as far as including the customers, the voice of the customer in our products moving forward.
Well, that was one of the reasons I stayed involved, right? I mean, there were a lot of challenges coming from defense interests, right? The next aircraft or the next ship or whatever. But the car guys, while we bring a lot of volume, well, we don't tend to be the ones pushing the envelope on new tool technology. We tend to be the fast followers. So it was a very good collaboration from that point of view. And then I can remember one smaller aerospace company. I think they got acquired. But they loved having us on board, because once GM said, "Well, we agree with you," well, then all of a sudden somebody like you would say, "Oh, well, if GM wants it, no problem. Well, we're going to go do it." And it wasn't quite that simple, everybody. But anyways, tell me about your funniest collaboration with these guys. I'm just curious from your perspective. I have mine, and that's for a different day. But what was your funniest event with the AWG or happening?
Let me think. So not too long ago, we had an on-site. So unfortunately, because of COVID, we didn't have any face-to-face in 2020 and 2021. But the last one we did, where we're up in upstate New York, and at a customer location, and it was freezing. And so part of our after hours activity as a group, we went to the Niagara Falls, right? And nobody was prepared for that weather coming in from other parts of the country, and just seeing the falls and just being just icicles hanging off your face. It's just
what month was this? Was this like March?
This was November.
Oh, well, that's early for the fall. The falls will freeze over in a cold enough year.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Well, you see, that's the other reason you get together, and you're right. We all miss face-to-face events because those are they turn into team building exercises, right? I can remember the flip side of this. We would go to Southern California for one of these meetings, and those of us from up here, we'd get on the plane with our winter coats, and everybody would laugh at us in LA. They're like, "What are you guys doing?" And I'm like, "Well, it's cold at home. I need it when I go home." But in any case, so what unique challenges do you see coming? What do you think the AWG's focus in the next year will be, or the next 2 years?
There's a lot of focus now on the MBD, MBSE. Those are the challenges. So a lot of companies have different definitions of what that means, or some don't even know what that means. So they're just trying to understand based on the conversations of where they need to go and the tools and the solutions that are there. But those topics
give me your definition. Now, you're right. There's a lot of overlap and confusion. So what is MBD?
So MBD, for the audience, is model-based definition, right? So that's part
definition.
of
get that right, everybody. It's definition. Okay, keep going.
Not design, definition, right? So definition, drives a lot of the processes downstream. So it's just not your CAD, right? It's just all the stuff that the CAD drives downstream, whether it's quality, inspection, simulation, manufacturing, right? That's the inputs for all those things downstream. So that at the end of the day, you get a physical part that you can have and inspect.
So for model-based definition, what do people usually leave out when they talk about it? What is it they don't comprehend that they should comprehend?
Well, it's still moving towards getting into using the 3D model. So that's still somewhat of a challenge, getting that GD&T that you normally would get on a drawing, right, now into a 3D model, and how to use that, and how the semantics of that 3D model can automate or drive some of the processes downstream, with whether it's manufacturing. Mm-hmm.
So from your vantage point, what's the real issue? I mean, those of us that deal with models and deal with embedding that into the drawing, into the model so you can interact with it, we even built KBE apps that would build part of it at one point. We can see the power. But you're right, people are still resisting. So from your vantage point, why? What's the resistance? What do we got to get over to make this better?
I think there's still I would think that a lot of the standards that are coming out, AP 242, QIF, all those things that the PLM vendors and providers are still trying to figure out, what's the end use case of how the customer is going to be using that data, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of, I wouldn't say the chicken or the egg, but it's not like if you have a standard that everybody has to use it. Right. So we have different technologies that we're implementing with MBD in mind, but not necessarily what's moving forward with some of the standards, I think.
Okay. So the other one, MBSE, what's that?
So MBSE is a model-based systems engineering, right? And so it's kind of defining up front, what is that system or that model going to do at the end, right? It's not turning on your CAD system and start building a model, right? So even what are you modeling? First of all, what's the requirements? What is supposed to look like? What is supposed to do, right? And that's part of what we're trying to facilitate in those discussions around what is those upfront requirements. What are those system models if you want to incorporate that?
Well, and it often seems to me that when people say system, if you're in a room of there's three of us on this call, if we said, tell me the system that we're using to record this podcast, we probably will have three different answers. And so my point is we don't much agree on the system boundaries. And so MBSE, model-based, most people can debate. We're going to talk about some form of model, a performance model, a 3D model, something, right? System, we disagree on that because we all have different perspectives. And then E is engineering, right? So model-based systems engineering. Well, engineering is all about finding the best solution for the problem you're trying to solve, right? Well, back to system, if the system boundaries, if the system definition is vague or ambiguous, it's really difficult to do MBSE. You got any tricks for getting people past that problem? Is there a way to know you've defined the system well, or is the point that maybe that's just it? We need to build robust products that can deal with systems that vary. Some days they're a car and some days they're semi-automated and you can take your hands off the wheel. At least that's what the commercial says, right? Right. Or even in the near future, and Siemens has been paying a consulting shop I work for to write articles about autonomous, right? So I've had a lot of insight into where you guys are going. But this whole idea of autonomous vehicles, what's the system? It's no longer the vehicle. It's a participant in a broader system of a bunch of vehicles in a cityscape, right? And so MBSE needs to handle all of those systems, right? And it depends on who you're selling to and what you're selling. Are you selling hands-free driving that you never have to think about it, or are you selling safer driving because it helps you stay in your lane, right? Those are different levels of automation. So I think MBSE, its biggest challenge is the word system. And we ought to just acknowledge it and get on with it. Right now, the aerospace guys, especially defense, they have it simpler. And the reason it's simpler is because the system's defined. It's in a contract, right? But it's complicated because they're building a lot of new stuff. Well, us other industries and this has been an interesting debate to have with these guys, especially at the AWG, where we have a lot of reuse. Well, we don't want a new system from scratch all the time. It's too risky. It's too expensive, right? We just want the next car that's prettier and has a different color and maybe it has more performance, right? So I think system in those two worlds is really different, right? So MBSE application in those two worlds is going to be really different. Interesting. Well, what else besides MBD and MBSE should the AWG be working on next? What are you guys at Siemens thinking we're missing that we should be focused on?
Well, we're a lot of focus on right now with the AWG. It grew out from the NX CAD like in 1993, right? Or Unigraphics, whatever version that was at that time, and then we grew into PDM. And then throughout those years, and now you can see what we're calling the accelerator portfolio. It's not just CAD and PLM or PDM anymore. There's a lot of other solutions within this PLM space, right? It's electrical, electronics, software, and then you go downstream. And how do you manufacture that? How do you plan and manufacture that? And how do you sustain these systems or these vehicles? And so we're trying to expand more of those other topics into the AWG and try to get more of those individuals or those groups within those companies to then start expanding the breadth of the AWGs as far as use cases and things like that, right? And so right now, yeah. And so additive manufacturing is one of the subgroups that we've had in the past, and that's something that's always going to be at the tip of the spear moving forward with aerospace as we move forward. And so I think and that's not just a simple answer as well, right? That there's a lot of things within certifying those models or certifying those parts, as you know, as within the confines of maybe just FAA or other governing bodies, right? So because of safety first, as far as that is concerned.
I think that is an area that's going to expand. Is this notion of certification? You're building the right thing best you can, and so how do you do that? In the past we did it. We built prototypes and then we test them, and then when they have failure points, or gosh forbid we have a failure in the field, we quickly address it and we fix something, right? I think the evolving complexity of these systems we're developing, we're going to have to get to a place where we're certifying up front. And I really don't know what that means, other than to say that you want to get into just like a manufacturing plant, you want to get into a process where you know what you put in and the tools and steps you apply, that when you're done, it'll work. You just know it'll work, right? You no longer need these long validation cycles that are independent of the development cycle. So the guys in software, both the guys that build tools and the guys that build control systems, they've been embracing agile technologies and fast delivery cycles for quite a while now. I think you're going to see that in all of engineering. You're going to see agile practices apply to other parts of engineering. And part of the trick there is you're validating as you go. And I call it a trick. It's just a new way of working. But you don't wait for the big prototype to plug everything together and see what fails. Rather, you keep asking the question from the beginning, how could this fail, and how can we build an inexpensive design that can avoid the failures? So, well, that's good. I applaud your involvement. I think the AWG is one of the best things going, and I think there should be more of them as we all can figure that out as we come out of the pandemic. And I think what's at the center of them is common interest. Well, the common interest is continuing to improve engineering, right? That they're all engineers. So I'm kind of curious for 2022 and 23. Where do you hope the AWG goes? What else would you like them to take on besides the current things we talked about, model-based, this, that, and the other thing?
Well, like I mentioned, a lot of the manufacturing side. And so some of those discussions, I think, would be helpful if, so like you mentioned, last time you were on site at an AWG meeting, that was probably in one of our development offices. And so in the past, we would go to California or to Ohio and back and forth, or maybe some other company location or a customer location. But I wanted to change things up in 2020. The first face-to-face I wanted to invite the AWG group was to MXD in Chicago. At the time, it was DMDII, right? The digital manufacturing. That's part of the government's manufacturing times digital. That's the new facility there. And so I wanted to get more exposure to the rest of the Siemens portfolio. What else does Siemens offer rather than CAD and PLM, right? So we have automation. I mean, those are the things that we can say that's differentiating from us from the competition, right? It's not just throwing it over the wall. Now I have a CAD model, or now I have the manufacturing G code to send out to the floor. But now we also have the machines, the controllers, all that's the IoT that to back that up and do a closed loop for manufacturing quality, right? And so those are the things that I want to expand those discussions or those topics with the AWG, so they see the full life cycle of what Siemens can offer.
Well, one of the guys that I left at GM, and I understand he's still involved with you, Paul Horning. He came from you guys, and then he joined us in manufacturing, and now he's in an engineering leadership position, which is fabulous. I think the people in engineering, especially the guys in design, they really should go visit a manufacturing floor. And the fact that you guys are a manufacturing company using your tools, I think is really, really quite important. And so I applaud you taking them there. We held one of our other working group meetings at Siemens Energy down in North Carolina. That was pretty smart. We all learned a lot, those of us that were not in the energy business. And everybody, by energy, I'm talking about big fans that rotate and generate electricity. Okay, so but it's cool to see a company like Siemens use their own tools, and then also be able to bring those learnings back to other companies that are trying to use them as well, right? So that's excellent. Well, Dave, it's been interesting chatting with you. You're bringing back memories. I wish I could come to an AWG meeting. I may have to figure out how to do that as a DES podcaster, okay?
Well, absolutely. I'll definitely put you on the schedule for next year as one of our guest speakers.
It would be fun, but you also have to remind me that I'm not speaking for a car company, okay? So if you got Paul there, I'm sure he'll take care of that. So in any case, Thom, back to you.
So, Dave, this was a great conversation, but I want to go back to something sort of in your introduction about you being the liaison for Siemens to the Digital Enterprise Society for, the different groups and AWG. I have a question, because I like to come back after these interviews and come back to some career advice questions. Why should someone get involved with an industry organization like the Digital Enterprise Society? I mean, it's a volunteer thing. You don't get paid. You already have a job. In your role as a technical account manager, you already have a full-time job. Why do you volunteer to be this liaison between DES and Siemens? What do you get out of it, and what does Siemens get out of it?
For me, it's the benefits of the collaboration and networking that I see, and being able to, rub elbows with experts in the industry, right? And then that's what I enjoy. It's not just punching a clock, because I'm very interested in the aerospace direction that's everybody's going. In fact, I'm also part of the Airways Association for Professionals, right? I've never flown in a plane before. I've flown a plane before, but we're invested in safety of flight. And so in the past, I mentioned that I was at the Navy depots working with the teams that are maintaining these planes to go into service. In the past 20 years ago, I was at the OEM that was building these brand new shiny plane. So it's a much different perspective when you see the full life cycle, right, from the beginning to the end. Also, sometimes you just see the brand new car rolling off the line, but you don't see that car 50 years later still running and how to maintain that, right? So that for me is very interesting, and I have a passion about that, and to want to try to instill that in the rest of my team to participate and do these kinds of things, participate in these industries or associations. It's important to me. I think it's important to our customers and in our company as well, and so I'm happy to do it.
So what do you think Siemens, because they support a lot of their employees and across business lines, being involved with different organizations that support the areas that they work in, why do you think Siemens is so positive at supporting different types of industry organizations and allowing their people the time to volunteer? What does the company get out of it?
The company gets, happy customers, and because now we're listening, they know that we're listening. We're not just a vendor or no software vendor. We're partnering with the industry, whether it's automotive, aerospace, right? We're going to, like I mentioned, is the airworthiness conferences. We're part of the Aerospace and Defense Executive Council, or Aviation Week, and I'm sure there's tons of stuff, Craig, that that Siemens was involved in the auto side as well. But it's just instilled in us just to, we want to be a partner with every customer that we have. And it's not just selling software, right? We are very interested in the success of our customers, which then reflects on us. And we're excited when customers win programs and we can say they're using our tools, right? Our solutions. And we have something that we can hang our hat on that. So
I always like to give kudos to companies that support trade associations across industry lines, because it's super important for that end user who's looking to enhance their career, to have the different companies involved and allowing their people to be involved. So thank you for what you do for the Digital Enterprise Society. And thanks for being a guest here on the Digital Enterprise Society podcast.
Thanks, guys. I'm happy to participate. Thank you.
Awesome.
Hey, Dave, appreciate it. It's really nice chatting with you. We'll catch up with you soon, and I look forward to a face-to-face AWG meeting, maybe May, maybe June. Let's hope, right?
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully soon.
Well, and thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. Please join us here every single week for more thoughts, ideas, and information in and around product lifecycle management. The Digital Enterprise Society, it is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Go check us out at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more connection without boundaries and creation without limits.